Ladies and gentlemen, outrage has erupted after a radical judge in Democrat Hennepin County, Minnesota, just did the unthinkable. And this on the heels, just hours after Ilhan Omar's house of cards comes crashing down, is collapsing right now, ladies and gentlemen. And the Somali-born congresswoman who's spent years peddling that anti-American bile, garbage, hateful, hate-filled rhetoric, trash to her now designated terror group and brotherhood, while her district devours billions in welfare fraud. The Somali first agenda pusher just got hit with the reckoning she never saw coming, and rightfully so, because Ilhan Omar is not representing America's interests in Congress. And so you see, Donald Trump, he didn't just tweet about it, he declared absolute war. TPS for Somalis in Minnesota, terminated, effective immediately. Somali gangs terrorizing the state, billions missing, send them back. It's over. Her and her brother husband. Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. But wait, there's more, and it only gets worse. A twist in the plot nobody saw coming and no one's talking about. Well, that is until now. My video here may be the first to share, and I wouldn't be surprised if others in our circle who share our beliefs, values, opinions, like-minded, they'll be talking about it too. But Ilhan Omar, her response to President Trump and the latest blow to the enemy from within, just more of that trademark smugness from the headscarf-wearing, incestuous, foul-mouthed Muslim woman exercising what few rights she has left under Sharia says, good luck with a policy that changes nothing. We're here to stay.
Somalis are not terrorizing this nation. We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen themselves as a fabric of this nation. So not only are we not going anywhere, we are not going to allow anybody to make us feel less Minnesotan or less American.
Sounds like a threat. But meanwhile, the internet and the comment section has their own response, and they say, oh, Ilhan, you arrogant fraud. Your citizenship might be ironclad on paper, but the Republican hounds are baying for denaturalization probes into your sham marriage to your brother, Ahmed Elmi, the artist you wed for green cards while filing taxes with your real husband. Public records don't lie. Overlapping addresses, deleted niece posts about your own daughter, Somali elders whispering it was an open immigration scam all along. But folks, President Trump has already signaled the DOJ, revoke it, deport her, and take that snake oil husband brother with you. But she's not crumbling alone. Her entire fraud squad, starting with Minnesota State Senator Omar Fateh, the Minneapolis mayoral wannabe who lobbied Tim Walz to greenlight the Feeding Our Future scam, is next in line. Ah, yes, Omar Fateh, the self-styled Democratic socialist, first Somalian Muslim in the Minnesota Senate, now licking his wounds after that November 4th shellacking where Jacob Frey crushed him by 6 points in the polls, 53% to 47% in the ranked choice runoff. But let's rewind to why this guy, safely ensconced in a cushy Senate seat until 2027, would even gamble it all on a demotion to mayor. Thank God Minneapolis voters saw through the grift and sent him packing, because if he had won, it would have been game over for the city. Make no mistake, Fateh was the fraud squad's calculated power grab. And so you see, Fateh didn't just wake up one day thinking, golly, Gosh, I'd love less power and more headaches managing potholes in the city. No, this was a cold, calculated pivot straight out of the radical left playbook. As a senator, he's got statewide reach, but it's diluted. Bills get watered down in committees, vetoed by moderates, lost in the noise of St. Paul. But as mayor, well, that's executive muscle. Direct control over budgets, police contracts, immigrant sanctuary policies, and crucially, the purse strings on those social programs that turned into more than $250 million of black holes. Yeah, and Fateh, he announced his run back on November 20th of last year, right after Trump's re-election sweep. Huh, kind of odd timing there, right? But peel back the press releases and it's clear. He eyed City Hall as the perfect petri dish to brew his brand of socialism, scam, alchemy unchecked. Picture it, imagine if you will, Fateh with those creepy bug eyes, son of Somali immigrants, DSA card-carrying revolutionary who in 2021 bragged on video at a Feeding Our Future gala. Yes, that gala at the Safari restaurant Elon Omar hyped. Yeah, he bragged about twisting arms at Tim Walz's office. Zero evidence of fraud, he says, parroting after strong arming the Department of Education to keep the cash flowing. He defended Amy Bach, the mastermind who just got convicted in March for masterminding the whole $250 million kid meal heist, calling state oversight immoral and racist. And there's that word again, folks. Remember that word because we're going to talk about it a little bit more later. And perhaps maybe how it's being misconstrued and the meaning and definition isn't quite what it used to be, especially from the angle and perspective of it being used by the woke left, extremely progressive, socialist, Muslim Brotherhood, Somali, radical DSA party now. So there's that. But why was Fateh trying to run cover? Well, it's because those providers, mostly Somalia-owned fronts, were his donors. 11 of them. 11 of them funneling $11,000, 11 grand straight to his campaign before he returned it in 2022 out of an abundance of caution, he said. Yeah, right. He's got me rolling my eyes harder than the young lady on CNBC talking to Hakeem Jeffries. And meanwhile, trial testimony led to convicted fraudster Hannah Marekin, I'm probably butchering her last name, spilling it all the beans, that is. And now they use Fateh as a pawn, sicking him on Attorney General Keith Ellison to bully audits and paint fraud probes as an anti-immigration bigotry. And he bit hard. Because in his world, exposing the scam means exposing the network. But you want to know what the real tell is? Well, this wasn't about affordability or housing justice. That's the sugarcoating. And we've talked at great length about that in previous videos, and the horse is dead. So no sense in beating it anymore. But Fateh's mayoral pitch mirrored the Brotherhood's long game. Infiltrate local power to seed chaos from the ground up, inside out. As senator, he pushes bills like free college and Uber wages, noble on paper, but diluted in reality. As mayor, though, he'd control the streets, expanding sanctuary ordinances to shield TPS fraudsters, funneling city grants to nonprofits like his old feeding pals, and get this, implementing a labor standards board. That sounds very progressive, but could have rubber stamped clan-based hiring for those mobile Somali gangs terrorizing the Twin Cities. More control over the refugee enclaves in Cedar and Riverside, where 80,000 Somalis, many on that revoked TPS, huddle in parallel societies. Hawala's humming with your tax dollars bound for Al-Shabaab. Yes, folks, an Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist organization. This has all been reported already, national news, but it's not leadership that they hoped for in Minneapolis. It was leverage. So the scams locally, where feds can't touch you, and watch the ideology metastasize. Defund police for public health, but only after stacking the deck with unvetted imports who vote block for the squad. Does any of that sound familiar? Well, it should, because it's the exact same Mamdani model Zoran is pitching in New York. The jihadist socialists who clinched the Big Apple by courting CAIR Cash, or CAIR Cash, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and capitalizing on posing for mosque photo ops with imams tied to Holy Land Foundation terror fronts. Those who were aware and awake, folks paying attention, much like you all, everyone who subscribed to my channel, right-wingers, we all screamed Muslim Brotherhood sleeper cell. And guess what? His backers included Sami Doon, the PFLP Hamas proxy the feds just designated terrorist. And for your own personal knowledge, Sami Doon is an international activist group founded in 2011 that presents itself as a grassroots network dedicated to advocating for the release of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. It organizes protests, educational events, and campaigns focused on political prisoners, often framing them as victims of occupation rather than individuals convicted of terrorism or violence. The group has chapters in the US, Canada, Europe, Germany, France, Netherlands, for example, and elsewhere, and claims to build solidarity with Palestinian resistance movements. However, Sami Doon is widely regarded as, and by governments and watchdogs, as a front organization for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP, a Marxist Leninist militant group designated as a terrorist organization by the US, EU, Canada, Israel, Japan, and others. The PFLP, the second largest faction in the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, has a history of plane hijackings, assassinations, including the 2001 murder of Israeli tourism minister Rehavam Zaiv, and participation in attacks like the October 7 Hamas-led assault on Israel. Sami Doon has been accused of using its humanitarian facade to raise funds for the PFLP, glorifying its members like convicted terrorists like Ahmed Saadat, or like those expensive luxury cars, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, Mercedes, the ones that you'd see being dropped off and unloaded and delivered in the Somali neighborhoods, and also raising funds to incite violence against Israel, the US, and Western allies. But all that to say, Fateh is the Midwest mirror to it all. Endorsed by Ilhan Omar, DSA radicals, and SEIU unions that turn blind eyes to the fraud. Or better yet, take Katie Wilson in Seattle as a Pacific Northwest chapter to the Zoran Mamdani Socialism Network, a self-proclaimed progressive socialist who ousted the incumbent on a social housing wave, taxing Amazon to fund public petri dishes for her odd job activist crew. WAPO called it a socialist experiment unbound by state oversight, warning she'd run wild with free childcare scams while the city bleeds $9 billion budgets dry. These aren't coincidences, they're blueprints. Demoted to mayor for the executive throne, fewer checks, more refugees, endless grants for equity that evaporate into hawalas. And look, I know that Katie Wilson isn't, nor is Gavin Newsom Somali, nor is either of them Muslim. And in Gavin Newsom's case, he's not even a mayor, but he is also a part of the problem. And I would be remiss if I failed to mention how Gavin Newsom spent $450 million in taxpayer dollars for a new 911 system. However, As Libs of TikTok has pointed out here, they just announced that they're scrapping it because the design was a total failure. And so for all of you out there watching and or listening, that puts woke California at another $450 million down the drain. The only thing Newsom excels at is wasting tax dollars on bad projects. But don't think for 1 second it's limited to Nancy Pelosi's nephew. Whereas it seems to me that the only treatment for TDS is stealing taxpayer money and then blowing it. Keyword, treatment, because there is no cure. Which basically means that if you vote for this and allow elections to be stolen or won, that plants these cells into your government, well, then they will continue to bleed you dry indefinitely. All right, y'all, let's hit pause for a second because this matters and it's really important. We talk a lot on this channel about taking control of your life, making smart choices, and not letting the system overwhelm you. But when it comes to navigating Medicare, it can feel like you're wading through a swamp of total confusion. Plans, coverage, costs, deadlines, you name it. And that's where Chapter steps in. They're not just another company. They're the real deal when it comes to free Medicare help. Chapter's team of advisors has helped thousands of people across the country find the right Medicare plan, and they do it with one goal in mind, putting you first. No fees, no pressure, just honest guidance to make sure you're covered without breaking the bank. Big insurance companies have their own agendas, but Chapter's got your back, fighting to get you the plan that works for you. So if you're approaching Medicare age or helping a loved one figure it out, don't go it alone. Call Chapter today at 270-467-2426 and start getting the clarity you deserve. Because at the end of the day, protecting your health and your wallet, well, that's not just smart. It's living life on your terms. And once their host can no longer survive to support the parasite, the host dies. The disease, the parasite lives on and then moves on to another victim or a different city to attack. It's a bit of a play on words here, but you all catch my drift, don't you? Meanwhile, President Trump has made announcements as it relates to improvements to our overall healthcare, which seems positive and America first, when compared to that awful and treacherous Obamacare. Granted, this will not be a simple and easy fight to bring affordability and better care to legal U.S. citizens, as we all know the government shutdown was an unnecessary leverage play by the Democrats, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, AOC, to just hurt Americans. Hakeem Jeffries, friends with Jeffrey Epstein, says the quiet part out loud and is humiliated in the process.
House Democrats have launched a discharge petition to try to compel an up or down vote on a straight 3-year extension so we can provide working class Americans with the same level of certainty that my Republican colleagues provided their billionaire donors when passing the one big ugly bill.
Minority Leader Jeffries, let's talk about that discharge petition. You need 218 votes in the House in order to pass that. You've got 214 members in the Democratic caucus, so you only need 4 House Republicans to have to sign onto it to get this passed. But the idea of saying that this is a 3-year extension instead of a 1 or even 2-year extension has any potential Republicans saying, forget it, this is dead on arrival. That's the opinion of Representative Don Bacon. He's a Republican from Nebraska who has been working with the idea of potentially extending for 2 years. But 3 years, they say, is dead on arrival. So if this is something that you want to satiate, if you want to get done, you are going to need at least some Republicans to come over. Why not start with a 1-year extension or potentially even a 2-year extension?
Well, Leader Schumer offered a 1-year extension in the context of trying to end the Trump Republican shutdown.
Yeah, but that's different. I'm talking about what you have now. Let's not go back to what's done in the past and what has not been extended. If you want to get something that has actually done, you need to do something that will have bipartisanship.
You can ask me the question. You can ask me the question. I'll provide the answer.
Answer the question instead of going back.
I'll provide the answer. No.
AOC does too. AOC was caught on camera in the halls of Congress saying, and I quote, "They're learning that Democrats are not weak. And next time, we just have to hurt Americans more to make them fold.
They're learning is that Democrats are weak, and that next time we just need to hurt working people and working Americans more to get them to fold.
Look out, America. This is what Democrat socialists are all about. Flexing power, bragging about pressure tactics, and openly admitting the strategy is pain, not policy. But so you see here, ladies and gentlemen, as we follow back up on Hakeem Jeffries and that CNBC disaster, CNBC is business news. Their audience is business people and investors, sharp, no-nonsense folks who rightfully expect the House Minority Leader to be able to answer a direct question with a direct answer. And the host is beyond frustrated because every single time Hakeem Jeffries comes on their show, he insults the intelligence of everybody watching by dancing around every question and serving up a steaming plate of Democrat word salad, meaningless platitudes, buzzwords, and zero substance. Let's remember what actually happened. The Democrats were demanding a 1-year Obamacare subsidy extension just to reopen the government. They caved, got absolutely nothing in return, and were publicly humiliated for it. So now, because getting embarrassed once apparently wasn't enough, they've moved the goalposts and are demanding a full 3-year extension. Why 3 years, you might ask? Well, it's simple. That way, the subsidies conveniently expire right before the 2028 elections, giving Democrats the perfect scare tactic. Hey, everyone, look over there. The big bad Republicans are coming for your health care. They want your premiums to skyrocket. All so they can keep kicking the can down the road instead of ever addressing the real foundational problem, which is that Obamacare is fundamentally broken, unsustainable, and was designed to collapse into single payer all along. But like I said, President Trump does have a solution and a plan he wants to bring to the table.
Going to go down. It went the exact opposite with the biggest increase of healthcare in any country. It's a disaster. And I'm calling today for insurance companies not to be paid, but for the money, this massive amount of money, to be paid directly to the people of our country so that they can buy their own health care, which will be far better and far less expensive than the disaster known as Obamacare. And I've had, I think, great support. I've even had Democrat support. So we want the money that would be going to the insurance company, which is hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, their stock prices have gone up by 1,000% in many cases, 1,000% over a short period of time, because our country stupidly pays them so much money with this Obamacare scandal. So I want the money to go directly to you, the people. And you go out and you'll buy your own health insurance and you'll negotiate different plans and you'll get much better insurance, and you will be an entrepreneur for yourself. So I'm always willing to work with anyone, including the other party. We'll work on something having to do with health care. We can do a lot better. We can do great. So much money is involved, and we're willing to pay so much money to the people. So we're going to pay a lot of money to the people. They're going to go out and buy their own health care, and we're going to forget this Obamacare madness. So with all of that, I just want to tell you the country has never been in better shape.
We've got a long road ahead of us, folks. So stay tuned, stay locked in, stay subscribed. There is possibility of a future government shutdown again come January as the Democrats again choose to try to inflict more pain on the American people. Also, they can try and make President Trump look bad. But let's get back to Minneapolis, Ilhan Omar and Omar Fateh. Because I'm sure some of you out there are asking, Kevin, is this all not just pure evil? Well, you bet it is. 100% subversive evil dressed as empathy is how they'd like MSNBC or MS Now and CNN and ABC and CBS and all the other woke fake news media outlets to spin it. But old googly eyes Fateh gambled on that throne to supercharge the Somali al-Shabaab pipeline, your wallet, directly tied to and connecting funds from your bank account to Al-Shabaab, one city contract at a time. However, Minnesotans rejoice and thank God voters said no to that instead. But with Trump's DOJ circling, Fateh's Senate perch won't save him for long. Indictments incoming, fraud squad fracturing Fateh, his Iran enablers, the whole rotten network. This is inevitable doom, folks, and it's just the beginning. Because he's got some skeletons in the closet and they're just begging to be let out. And so you see, Fateh pocketed $11,000 from indicted grifters, bragged on video about shielding the program from zero evidence of fraud audits, then watched as $250 million in ghost meals vanished into Hawala wires, straight to Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda butchers your taxes have been arming for years. Ilan's own deputies working underhandedly from within our own government, donating to her campaigns from the raid sites while she recorded her promo videos for the very restaurants federal agents shuttered. Now they take to podiums, speaking in a language we all need Google Translate for us to understand as they shout more of their squad echo chamber rhetoric.
community hadda caruurteena inaan garab istaagno chiefkana waa u baahannahay annagana waa isku baahannahay
عشان oo kamid ah odayaasha community-ga Soomaaliyeed iyo waalidiinta magaaladan degan ilmana ku koriyay.
The Somali community here in Minneapolis has been welcoming and has shown love towards me, and I appreciate it. Over the last 3 years, we have been working together to try and address some of the real serious problems that we have in our community. We have to be honest at times with the problems that we're having in our community, and we need our community to help us fix those problems together because it's real and it's serious. At the same time, if people have taken anything that I have said out of context in a way that's caused harm, I apologize and I'm sorry for that because that's not my intention at all.
They're all tainted, but deportation referrals are stacking up, investigations incoming, and their progressive fortress turning to ash. This is inevitable doom, folks. ICE vans rolling through Cedar and Riverside, ripping up TPS for 80,000 of her voters overnight. House Republicans already fundraising off petitions to arrest and deport Ilhan Omar. Brandon Gill's email screaming, send her back to Somalia where she belongs. Trump's White House mocking her with goodbye waves. Her brother's sham, now under a federal microscope. Fateh's bribes in the hands of a grand jury. The squad's terror-tied donors exposed and exiled. No more CARE or CAIR keynotes. No more some people did something alibis. Just handcuffs and a one-way flight to the caliphate she secretly cheers. America First isn't a suggestion. It's the blade falling on traitors like her and others. Our tax dollars funded this nightmare long enough. Now we map the full takedown. The Hawala trails to Al-Shabaab, the gang death threats silencing witnesses, the Brotherhood playbook she parrots. Stay locked in, folks, because Ilhan's empire ends here and now, and we're just getting started, folks. Stick with me and stay locked in here, friends. That is, of course, if you prefer the truth and the facts. We're not chasing viral clips or recycled headlines. We're doing something far rarer these days, and we're telling the whole story out loud in one place. The one the algorithms and the fake news anchors quietly hope that you never hear. But like I said at the start of this video, outrage has erupted after a radical judge in Democrat Hennepin County, Minnesota just did the unthinkable. Watch as this woke Minnesota judge overturns the guilty verdict of Abdi Fattah Yusuf, a Somalian man in Minnesota who stole $7.2 million in taxpayer money from fake Medicaid billing, for which a grand jury swiftly convicted him of. But now a judge has just announced a full acquittal on all charges and he walks free. A tad bit longer of a clip, but certainly worth a watch and or a listen. We'll discuss afterwards. Roll the tape.
At the August trial for Abdi Fattah Yusuf, the jury heard evidence that he ran his home health care company Promise Health out of a mailbox at a Central Avenue address where multiple other home health care companies were supposedly located. Yusuf and his wife Lol Ahmed were charged with stealing $7.2 million of taxpayer money through Medicaid overbilling in a personal care assistant or PCA scam. The couple allegedly spent tens of thousands of the fraud money on luxury items for themselves. Despite the jury swiftly convicting Yusuf, Judge Sarah West last week decided they got it wrong.
It's reversing or overturning a jury's verdict.
Defense attorney Joe Tamburino, who's not affiliated with this case, reviewed the decision and analyzed it for KARE 11 News. He says Judge West ruled that the state's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and that she believed the state did not rule out other reasonable inferences.
That in fact there could have been other reasonable theories other than guilt in this case. That's what it comes down to.
Despite the ruling, even Judge West wrote that she is troubled by the manner in which fraud was able to be perpetuated at Promise Health.
I was stunned.
State Representative Kristen Robbins, chair of the House Fraud Prevention and State Oversight Committee, says she's now reviewing if any state laws need to be tightened.
We want to strengthen state law so that we can get prosecutions out of these cases, because clearly a jury thought he was guilty.
Jurors in the case can't believe the decision.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked based off of all of the evidence that was presented to us and the obvious guilt that we saw based off of the said evidence. It was not a difficult decision whatsoever. The deliberation took probably 4 hours at most. Based off of the state's evidence that was presented, I was beyond a reasonable doubt.
The attorney for Mr. Yusuf, Ian Burrell, sent me a statement today that says, in part, Judge West's ruling affirms what we have maintained from the beginning, that our client, Mr. Yusuf, was wrongfully accused and did not commit fraud or racketeering. The Attorney General's office filed an appeal this afternoon, so the Minnesota Court of Appeals will take a second look at this decision. Julie.
So, Lou, did Mr. Tamburino, did he have any kind of emotional reaction? And this is pretty stunning. This does not happen.
Yeah, he leaned towards the idea that this was kind of a one-off and that it would have a good chance at appeal. But the worry is that there's so many other cases just like it where somebody's in the exact same position as Mr. Yusuf but is charged with fraud. And if the judge can determine that maybe they didn't know that the fraud was going on underneath them in the case, then other judges could throw it out just like this one.
All right. Do you know how quickly the Court of Appeals would take this up? Any idea?
Probably months.
All right.
Needless to say, this is absolutely insane. And while on the subject and in the same state, more fraud in Tim Walz' Minnesota just exposed. And the required security checks on SNAP eligibility systems were never performed. First, Somalians faking autism diagnoses to exploit Medicaid and fund terrorists. And now this. Imagine what else might be happening.
Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. The program distributes nearly $70 million in benefits each month in Minnesota alone. Well, 5 Investigates has uncovered audits that show the state did not perform required security checks of the computer system that determines who is eligible to receive this money. It is a discovery that has SNAP recipients like Mateo Halbesleben worried about the safety of his personal data.
Minnesotans should be worried about far more than just the safety of their personal data. But there's massive fraud in Walz' estate. It's probably going to illegals and dead people. And I say probably because we know for a fact it's going to fund terror organizations. Yeah, folks.
Most alarmingly, a lot of that money is funneled through money traders, and in the end, ends up in the hands of al-Qaeda-linked Islamic terror group Al-Shabaab. So to bring this full circle, the Minnesota taxpayers are funneling money through fraudulent autism claims back to Somalia, where that money lands in the accounts of Al-Shabaab.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it is the story of how Minnesota, of all places, became the single largest terror finance hub on American soil. How billions of your taxpayer dollars have been laundered into the hands of an Al-Qaeda affiliate. and how one congresswoman, Ilhan Omar, sits at the protected center of it all, or so she thought. Just days ago, President Trump ended the charade with 8 words on Truth Social. I am terminating temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. Send them back. Ilhan Omar's response was instant and, frankly, breathtaking in its arrogance. And I quote, I am a citizen, and so are the majority of Somalis in America. Good luck celebrating a policy that really doesn't have much impact. We are here to stay, she says. We'll come back to that, folks. We are here to stay line in just a moment, but because the numbers, the court filings, and federal counterterrorism assessments, they paint a very different picture. Between 2018 and today, Minnesota has been the epicenter of at least 4 separate overlapping welfare fraud waves. The Feeding Our Future pandemic meal program theft and $250 million. I'm sure you guys have all heard about that one. Then you have the autism daycare explosion, where claims went from 3 million in 2018 to 399 million in 2023. We talked about that on a previous video, I know. Housing stabilization services, $2.6 million in 2020, projected to hit $122 million this year alone. The 2018 child care subsidy scam, another $100+ million vanished. And the quiet cases that never trended, incredible estimates from City Journal and federal auditors put the real total north of $2 to $3 billion. But would you be surprised if I told you that this level of Somali-linked corruption in Minnesota isn't a recent phenomenon? For instance, here's a news story and footage from the early 2000s showing Somali-owned businesses in Minnesota being raided by the FBI for operating as money laundering fronts for Al-Qaeda.
At Cedar and Riverside, 2 businesses shut down, their assets seized, and a suspect hauled away. That suspect may be Garad Jama, the only Twin Cities individual targeted by customs agents in the raid. Jama's last known address, this apartment complex at 2100 Bloomington Avenue South in Minneapolis. A block away from the first raid, 2 more businesses raided and shut down. At both locations, a steady stream of Somali refugees hoping to wire money home to their families turned away.
Business is shut down right now.
And at both locations, boxes of material seized, including a safe and a filing cabinet. Customs agents believe all 4 businesses are involved in funneling money to Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda terrorist network.
So not only are they unscrupulous enough to steal money allocated for hungry children, but they'll also steal money allocated for children with mental disabilities. We are importing people into this country from places that absolutely despise us. People who take advantage of our kindness, our generosity, our willingness to help, and our social safety nets designed to protect those truly in need, only to scam, rob, and defraud those very systems for everything they can get. As Ilhan Omar herself has implied, it doesn't matter that they live here. It doesn't matter that we make them citizens. They are Somali first, and the same cultural priorities and preferences that led to the destruction of Somalia are now being imported and contributing to the destruction of Minnesota. But let's quickly address the elephant in the room, why don't we? Because I've heard quite a few perspectives on this one here lately, and I just want to point out how it's not racist to take an honest look at the world and realize that we are not seen as the good guys by every country or culture, and conclude from that objective fact that it is not in our best interest to import these people into our country by the hundreds of thousands.
I believe that the rules that apply to the President of the United States should apply to every politician, to every political position. There should not be Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer's and Mitch McConnell's. There should not be lifetime politicians. They should have term limits. Secondly, a president must be a natural-born citizen. You cannot be born in another country and be president of the United States of of America. There's a reason for that rule. I believe that should apply to all politicians. This rule would exempt the Mamdanis of the world and the Ilhan Omars. These are people that are born in other countries with different value systems and imposing their values on Western culture. I believe anyone in leadership in this country should have been born in this country and raised under our values. It's a requirement of the President of the United States for a reason. I said what I said.
Granted, one of the arguments that gets presented often, especially on X, on social media, on Elon Musk's platform, comes from the outraged left or just the engagement bait farmers, and they always want to bring up Elon Musk. Elon Musk is an immigrant. Elon Musk this, Elon Musk that. But I can assure you that Elon Musk isn't trying to create and develop a network or community of South Africans to rip off our government assistance programs. There's a difference. But I digress. Because in the case of these Somali refugees, granted, they're not eating the cats and eating the dogs, but we do tell them that assimilating is racist and encourage them to keep their same culture and then act surprised when the exact same problems they fled from start occurring here. Meanwhile, pretentious liberals can pat themselves on the back and brag about how inclusive and tolerant and virtuous they are because they accept all cultures and customs, no matter what, even the most vile and repugnant ones, even the ones whose ideologies are centered around the destruction of our way of life. Even now, seeing how liberals are normalizing eating rice with their hands because white people forced utensils on other races. And if you think this is disgusting, well, then you're right. And congratulations for being of sound mind, practical in thinking, and coexisting in modern Western civilization. I would love to see more conservative values, not just eating utensils, continue to be deployed throughout America. But I know that that's a bit of a pipe dream right now. I mean, all things considered, and fortunately, we live in the great state of Florida and don't have to worry about stupid, woke, liberal BS and nonsense like this here. And what's happening in Nashville, Tennessee, for which you all may know is a very popular destination and one of our favorites, my wife and I, to visit whenever we get a chance. Democrat nominee for the upcoming TN07 special election, Afton Ben, condemns women who get married and start families, saying it's the product of deeply patriarchal structures, and how, and I quote, "My therapist always asks me to transcribe my dreams, and the recurring dream I've had is standing up in a cafeteria full of women and saying, I don't want children. I want power." But believe you me, having children should be the least of her concerns. I mean, she doesn't really give off that make your dick want to move vibe, if you know what I mean. I mean, her eyebrows, her padded shoulders, and that brown blazer she probably picked up from the Men's Warehouse screams, stay away, stay far, far away. But looks aside, her warped mind and the words she chooses to let out and speak for the world to hear her say is enough for me.
So for those of you who don't know, my partner has a trans son, and the month of April and the final week of March was incredibly upsetting for us. In the wake of the Covenant shooting and the disclosure that the Covenant shooter was trans, I was pulled into a chat with other trans organizers and activists across the state that were fearful of their lives. We identified threats from white-wing groups that they would show up at these Trans Day of Visibility events and threatening our trans kids. And so I had a snapped moment where I decided we need more people talking about the protections for trans kids in our trans communities at the legislature every day. The first thing I would do is I want to reiterate my first bill, which is to curb the expanded state surveillance of our trans community. 2, the state is going after, they're criminalizing mutual aid funds. And for those of you who don't work directly with mutual aid funds, this is a primary monetary channel that a lot of trans community members use to pay bills, And so the state intends to fully go after that so that they cut off any resources for trans folks. And third, every legislative session, I promise to carry a trans bill of rights so that we could push back against the far-right narrative that is being emanated by Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire, who have set up their home in Nashville. And I promise to do that. I promise to fight for our trans community.
But bruh, Democrat Afton Ben, who's running to represent Tennessee in Congress, says every legislative session, I promise to carry a trans bill of rights so that we can push back against the far-right narrative that's being emanated by Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire. And yet again, this comes back full circle to Mom Donnie.
Everyone calls me Sylvia. I've had this name for 9 years. This is respect.
I'm on the Christopher Street Pier, or as it was called in Sylvia Rivera's day, the Christopher Street Docks. In the 1970s, homeless queer New Yorkers had been pushed to the margins of a hostile society. But it was here, on the physical margins of our city, that they found a home. Sylvia was one of those New Yorkers. She arrived here at the age of 11, where she immediately landed in the center of the gay rights movement. She befriended the legendary Marsha P. Johnson, protested at Stonewall, and led marches for equality. But even among the queer community, trans New Yorkers were excluded. Rivera and others were discouraged from walking in pride, their participation erased from Stonewall history.
I believe in us getting our rights, or else I would not be out there fighting for our rights.
This cruelty took a toll. Rivera developed a substance abuse problem and was often homeless. When she had nowhere left to turn, she would sleep here, waves lapping nearby. Yet no matter what hardships she faced, Sylvia Rivera advocated for others. She and Johnson founded STAR to house and feed trans kids. The Christopher Street Pier is like our city, a place of immense contradictions. It's where outsiders found belonging, and it's also where Marsha P. Johnson's body was found. The victim of a suspected murder no one was ever prosecuted for. But even amidst this, we can chart a clear path forward that makes our city inclusive. Since taking office, Donald Trump has waged a scorched earth campaign against trans people. The man with the most power has expended enormous energy targeting those with the least. New York will not sit idly by while trans people are attacked. We'll deploy hundreds of lawyers to combat Trump's hate, make New York City an LGBTQIA+ sanctuary city, and create the Office of LGBTQIA+ Affairs to allocate millions for youth and adult housing programs, as well as gender-affirming care. We can't bring Sylvia back, but we can honor her memory by building a city where trans New Yorkers are cherished. In a time of darkness, New York must be the light.
Yeah. So Mom Donnie put out a 2-minute ad specifically about trans rights, including vowing to make New York City a sanctuary for trans people. This was a mere 3.5 weeks before the election. And this is, of course, after pledging to spend $65 million on healthcare for trans New Yorkers. Now, the idea that President Trump is waging a war, an attack against trans, is laughable. However, a president who cares so much and deeply about the mental health of all people in this country is commendable. Can you imagine if Zoran made New York City a sanctuary for all illnesses that we would like to get rid of from existence? Imagine just how bad things would get if the mayor of the largest and most populated city in America begged one, come on, bring your addiction and mental health problems to the Big Apple. It would be absolutely horrific. But it's what they want. And to make it some kind of normal, it seems, a cop-out used as a defense in the courts. Heading back over to Ilan and Tim Walz' Minnesota, a Somali immigrant was recently arrested for sexually assaulting a child, and his mosque subsequently sent a letter to the prosecutor begging for leniency, forgiveness, and understanding, claiming the man didn't know what he was doing was wrong because of cultural barriers and differences. Why? Why are we importing people who culturally don't understand that being a child predator is evil? Why are we tolerating this insane progressive social justice experiment with our own country? They genuinely believe the concept of bad people doesn't exist. Everyone is just misunderstood. Drop them in America, give them infinite free welfare, and as long as we never address the root cause of their behavior, which is the culture itself, they'll miraculously transform into upstanding citizens. No. But this latest fraud was so massive that even Donald Trump hit his breaking point and signed an executive order ending temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota. All of it centered in the Somali enclaves in Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's not a few bad apples, folks. That is an industrial scale siphoning operation. And here's the part no late night hosts will ever read on air. Federal counterterrorism sources on the record to investigative reporters have stated flatly the single largest funder of al-Shabaab in the world today is the Minnesota taxpayer. Let that land. Let that sink in. Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda franchise that murders Christians in shopping malls and recruits on American soil, collects a tax on virtually every dollar that reaches territory it controls in Somalia. Minnesota remittances in 2023 alone hit $1.7 billion. 40% of Somali American households send money home regularly. Hawala networks, unregulated cash wires, move it in hours. You do the math. That's more than their entire GDP, I think.
City Journal reports that the Somali fraud rings send a lot of money back to Somalia. 40% of households in Somalia get remittances from abroad. That totals $1.7 billion. That is more than the entire budget of the Somali government. Money being sent abroad, from abroad, back to Somalia. Where is that money going?
Look, it's not conjecture, but it is why the FBI raided Somali money transmitters in Minneapolis in the early 2000s for sending cash to bin Laden's network. It's why in 2022, the Treasury Department sanctioned a dozen Minneapolis-based Hawala operators. Same play, new decade. And while the pipeline hums in the background, the streets of the Twin Cities have their own Somali gang epidemic. Somali outlaws, hot boys, madhaban with attitude, clan-based, mobile, no fixed turf. They specialize in credit card skimming, identity theft, human trafficking, and most crucially, witness intimidation so severe that prosecutions collapse. Parents who cooperate with police receive death threats within hours. And that's not hyperbole. That's in the indictments, folks. Now, let's talk about the woman who represents this district in Congress. Ilhan Omar's personal story has always had inconsistencies. In 2009, she legally married Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. In the same period, she was filing joint tax returns with Ahmed Hirsi, the man she calls her first husband. Elmi and Omar attended North Dakota State University together. Elmi once posted a photo of Omar's daughter referring to her as his niece, and then hastily deleted it. Multiple Somali elders in Minneapolis have told reporters on Background that the marriage was widely understood as an immigration scam to bring a family member into the country. Omar calls all of this absurd and offensive and refuses to release the paperwork. And so to that I say, draw your own conclusions. But the deeper question is not a 2009 marriage license or certificate. The deeper question is loyalty. Omar keynotes regularly for CAIR, or CAIR, an organization named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terror finance trial in American history, the Holy Land Foundation case. She has fundraised for Islamic Relief USA, an entity banned in the UAE and Israel for terror ties. And she once described the 9/11 attacks as some people did something at a CAIR banquet. and she is intimately tied to the broader Muslim Brotherhood network. The Brotherhood's own internal documents seized by the FBI in 2004 described their mission in North America as, and I quote, a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within, so that God's religion is made victorious over all other religions, which I would have to assume their God is Allah. But look, folks, this ain't no Alex Jones InfoWars conspiracy here. And yeah, I'm going to hold back on Alex Jones for now based on what he had just recently said. However, that is Exhibit 3-85 in the U.S. versus Holy Land Foundation and was admitted into evidence. And in Somali, the Brotherhood operates as Al-Islah, ideological cousins to Hamas and Al-Shabaab's parent movement. Minneapolis mosques have been documented recruitment hubs for both Al-Shabaab and ISIS. 20 plus Minnesota men joined ISIS alone. Ilhan Omar has never once condemned Al-Islah by name, and she has never once called for the Muslim Brotherhood to be designated a terrorist organization. Her silence is a statement. And so you see, when President Trump says it's over, he's not engaging in random cruelty. He's swinging the first real axe at a 34-year-old humanitarian program that has quietly morphed into the largest running terror finance conduit in American history. This is not about hating immigrants. This is about hating terrorism, fraud, and the subversion of the United States from within. There are thousands of law-abiding Somali Americans who are as horrified by this as you and I are. God bless every one of them. This message is not for them. This message is for the political class that looked away while billions vanished, for the activists who scream Islamophobia the moment anyone asks for accountability, and for the quiet network that believed America was too polite, too fractured, too guilty to ever fight back. They were wrong. America First is not a slogan. It is the only firewall we have left. Designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Audit every dollar, prosecute the fraudsters without apology, and yes, revoke the protected status that has been abused for a generation. Because if we don't draw the line in Minnesota today, tomorrow it'll be your state, your schools, your taxes paying for the next 9/11. Figuratively speaking, we're still a sovereign nation. Let's start acting like it. Thank you all for listening. Drop your thoughts below, share this everywhere, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.